Welcome back. Well, we hope you had a nice and memorable Memorial Day weekend, but we want to catch you up on what you might have missed over your three-day weekend when it comes to the cover-up over Joe Biden's decline. It's part of my Today Big Three. Number one, the obvious. We have stated it's the biggest scandal in half a century, and that has now been stated as the obvious, an obvious fact that has eluded him for quite some time. But here is CNN's Jake Tapper on the size of the scandal.
It is a scandal.
Yes.
It is without question, and maybe even worse than Watergate in some ways.
Right.
Because Richard Nixon was in control of his faculties when he wasn't drinking, and so the idea that we don't mean to exonerate. It's not Watergate.
Right.
This is an entirely separate scandal. Maybe even worse. Maybe even worse.
It's hard to give Jake Tapper credit for reporting to you live and breathlessly that the sky is blue, when for months and years he's been reporting to you that the sky is red. But we all know it's blue. We've all known that Joe Biden's decline was evident. Now it's nice to hear another obvious fact. It's one of the biggest scandals of the past half century. Why? Why did they do it? Number two, the aides around Joe Biden, according to Tapper's co-author Alex Thompson, believed it was necessary to lie to you in order to stop Donald Trump.
These aides were not even Senate-confirmed aides. These are White House aides. These were unelected people. And one of the things that really, I think, comes out in our reporting here is that if you believe, and I think a lot of these people do sincerely believe, that Donald Trump was and is an existential threat to democracy, you can rationalize anything, including sometimes doing undemocratic things, which I think is what this person is talking about.
Of course, stopping Donald Trump has become the guiding ideological principle of the Democrat Party, but I think that's too charitable when thinking about those around Joe Biden. His aides, his family members, they were simply looking to hold on to power. And that's highlighted by number three. Alex Thompson once again, this time on PBS, laying out that the people around Joe Biden were taken to calling the Politburo.
But in terms of who was running the White House, it's a small group of people that have been around. Some people within the administration called them the Politburo. Mike Donnellan, Biden's longtime political liaison, Steve Ricchetti, who was sort of the legislative liaison, plus like a friend, Bruce Reed, at times, depending on his situation with the Biden people, Ron Klain. And then there are some people outside the Politburo that are closer to family, which would be obviously Jill Biden, Hunter Biden, but then Jill's main chief of staff, Anthony Bernal, and sort of his sort of like deputy in some ways, Annie Tomasini, who is often Biden's traveling chief of staff.
There you have it. There's the list. We often ask who was running the United States government and who would have run the government should Joe Biden had won in 2024. You've just been provided the list. It should not escape your attention. It's largely the same list of people that received 10-year blanket pardons at the end of the administration of Joe Biden. Here to react, Tezlyn Figaro. She is a former Bernie Sanders staffer and chief political correspondent for Revolt News. Tezlyn, thank you so much for being with us. I'm glad to have you here. So what do you think of this? Joe Biden clearly was run by those people around him, and they did it because they simply thought they had to stop Donald Trump, hide from all of us the condition of Joe Biden.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. There were some obvious issues that was pointed out from the Democrat Party as well. So to be fair to the folks who were who raised the money, the George Clooney's and all of the folks who were the big donors, they did draw attention to the issues of Joe Biden, which is why he was not on the ballot. So I think that's been clear and adjudicated. And they decided, to move forward with VP Harris, which I think did not make sense with only 100 days left on the ballot. So I can certainly see why Republicans, want to continue to keep talking about this. But in my opinion, he's not on the ballot. He didn't win, and it's time to move forward.
But before we move forward, Tezlyn, and we will together, we will move forward. Before we move forward, I don't think that George Clooney or those others around the Democratic Party suddenly saw the light or revealed to themselves that Joe Biden was in declining mental and physical capability. It wasn't that they told the truth until they realized he was going to lose. What mattered wasn't that he was incapacitated or virtually incapacitated. What mattered was, to them, he was going to lose.
Well, I think that matters to a lot of politicians. It is about winning and losing, unfortunately. And I would agree with you and say that it came down to there was nothing else that could be done. You know, all of his issues that he were having were being quite obvious. The polls were showing it. People were, you know, having concerns. So, yeah, they pivoted at the last minute. I think that the pivot, I was very clear that I think the pivot was a mistake, to be quite honest with you. But they did pivot and did decide to go in a different direction for the reasons that you're naming, one of them being to win.
But I'm sorry, just to follow up, and I have a couple things I want to hit with you other than this. You think it was a mistake? You think they should have run Joe Biden?
Yeah, I think 100 days, putting VP Harris with only 100 days to run was a setup, you know, right out the gate. I think it was virtually impossible. It's no thinking to it. We see it. It didn't work. Having someone say, you know, you're going to run 100 days and win without primarying her, giving her an opportunity to go around and actually win those votes individually as a candidate, it was a setup for failure. So if anything, I do blame the party for not getting him off earlier and holding a primary and allowing folks to be able to be the nominee, including VP Harris, and giving her a fair shot.
I hear you, and I think your analysis is on the topic we're discussing, which is winning and losing. I don't think even you would want the country to be managed under the same conditions we saw if Joe Biden was in that level of decline. But, okay, when it comes to the sheer strategy of winning and losing, I'll hear you out on that. On that note, I want to share with you this. This is from the New York Times, Tezlyn. The headline reads, How Donald Trump Has Remade America's Political Landscape. Inside, it reads, Trump has reordered American political divide both geographically and demographically. Republicans have made gains in working-class counties. Democrats, almost exclusively wealthy areas now. It's an erosion of working-class support. And here's what's interesting, Tezlyn. Among black, white, and Latino voters alike, everyone has left Democrats, moved towards Republicans, and that's unnerved the Democratic Party.
Well, saying everyone is an absolute. We won't say everyone. There has certainly been a shift like it should be. But to be honest with you, I don't even know if a lot of Republicans even consider Trump a Republican per se. He's his own genre, if you will. He's his own movement. He's his own person. And yes, there's been some shift, as it should be with every election. People have an opportunity to decide what they want to do. But we can't say everyone, because still the majority of black voters, those who are actually registered to vote, still overwhelmingly vote for the Democrat Party. But there were major shifts in the Latino community, major shifts in the Asian American community, major shifts, you know, obviously in the white community. So, yeah, I agree. People did decide to go on a different route, enough to win the Electoral College. But still, when we look at, you know, voter by voter, it's still a lot to, you know, to be gained.
Well, here's where I agree with you, Tezlyn. I think that the Democratic Party has a lot of work to do. It looks like now it's the party of the rich and the elite. But what happens with the Republican Party after Donald Trump is of great question, and whether or not the Republican Party will stay in the image of Donald Trump. Tezlyn, you're always invited back. I always appreciate the conversation. And maybe next time we'll look for a little more disagreement, because I know you're feisty when it comes to a debate, and I like that. So you're welcome back,
For
Tezlyn.
sure.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.